In this initial episode of Sir Ulric Hosts Money Matters, Luke Mikic joins the show in what promised to be a remarkable reminiscence of a digital nomad. I've been following you for years, and it's just nice to see, you coming to like your own with your whole story about traveling, about where you're from, where you're going. And I just want to get started. First of all, you're originally from Australia. Tell me about, your upbringing.
So my upbringing, I was living in Australia for essentially 24 years, and wasn't until maybe 2022 that I decided to finally escape Australia. So since then, I think I've been to 40 cities and maybe 15-ish countries, something like that. I don't know. But yeah, so my upbringing while I was in Australia, it was I lived in a pretty average home. I got taught the importance of money pretty early on. Living with a family household that was pretty stressed out. So my upbringing was great. I mean, it taught me a lot about what I know about money today. So I was homeless when I was 16, and that obviously taught me to value money, savings, and all of those good things from a very early age. So that's the short and compressed story of my background in Australia, I suppose.
So who brought you into Bitcoin? Was it your parents? Was it just trolling the internet? How did you come into Bitcoin?
It would have been Max Kaiser and Andreas Antonopoulos in 2017. So at the time, I think I was doing a double major in maths and chemistry at uni, and I stumbled upon a few videos on YouTube. I was trying to get ahead in any way, shape, or form I could. I kept looking at property investing and kind of scratching my head thinking, why do property prices just continue to go up and up and up? This doesn't make any sense. And I obviously stumbled upon the rabbit hole that is fiat money. I was a gold bug in probably 2015, 2016, and found Bitcoin in 2017 because of Andreas and Max Kaiser. And I learned enough in a sleepless span of probably 2 to 3 weeks, binge listening to Andreas and Max, that I was going to leave university to just study Bitcoin as much as I could. And that was 2017, and the rest is history.
Right on. So you became probably one of the more famous digital nomads out there in Bitcoin Twitter. Talk to me about your decision to basically take off from a first world country. Australia is pretty good, but you kind of felt like it wasn't for you anymore. Can you get into that?
Yeah, so I read the book The Sovereign Individual in 2019, and that put a lot of the dominoes on the domino board, so to say, in regards to how governments are going to react in the future to transformative technology. Because now, for the first time in civilization's history, we have the opportunity to work from anywhere around the world. And it doesn't really make sense that we live and work in the same nation that we were born in. It's as simple as that. And right now, we're living through an unprecedented period of time where the Western countries all around the world, like Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, have absolutely unprecedented levels of debt. And the only way that they can pay that debt back is by printing money, which is going to raise inflation. When inflation gets super high, people get pushed to their limits, and they start looking for alternatives. So people can now all of a sudden use the technology that we're living with today to go and work somewhere else around the world. And when more and more people leave these big bloated nation states with all of this debt, these nation states have to raise taxes on their existing citizens to try to, fight this debt conundrum that they're in. And I just see like the West, all of these Western countries, because of the debt that they have, they're all going to have to go through a period of financial repression and them becoming more and more authoritarian and tyrannical to try and pay back this massive debt burden and to try to stop these digital nomads from leaving their country and taking their wealth with them. Because that's the only way nation states ever pay back their debt, through stealing wealth off other people. And they can do that through inflation or straight outright theft, and that is raising taxes super high. So that's like probably a 2-minute random summary of the book, The Sovereign Individual. But that's my view of the world. And I think I don't want to be living in a Western nation state as they go through this debt deleveraging over the next decade that I believe they are in. So I think that whenever you get to levels of debt that we are in today, you see lots of excuses for money printing pop up all around the world. So I don't think it's any coincidence that Western nation states have more debt today than they did during World War II. And today, all of a sudden, we're seeing all these world wars pop up. I'm not going to get into the politics of any of that, but you're seeing lots of these excuses for money printing. So my view is, as a digital nomad, I don't want to live in these Western nation states. I want to go where my money is treated best. And that's why I haven't returned back to Australia in 2022, and I've got no intentions to do so.
So you left in 22, or was it before that? It was 22.
22. Yep.
Okay. Right on. So it wasn't like when the COVID lockdowns happened, that didn't really trigger it. You kind of braved the storm there, but did that awaken, or did that contribute to your decision in any way? Or you kind of said like, yeah, I can handle this. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. So I didn't actually cover that. So I read the Sovereign Individual book in 2019, was already a Bitcoiner. As soon as 2020 happened, I could see the writing on the wall in like February 2020. Like I was posting on Twitter and Facebook saying, this is not 14 days to flatten the curve. Once you give away your power once, this is going to become very bad. So I actually, I looked at the date that I received my passport. I applied for my passport in January 2020 because I didn't have a passport before then. But I didn't receive the passport until like halfway through 2020. I'm not going to dox the exact date I got my passport. But by that time, the international borders had already closed. So I was trapped within Australia. And in 2020, 2021, and 2022, I went through every different thought experiment possible to leave Australia. I looked at buying a boat home. At the time, you could pick them up for about $75,000 where I was living on the Gold Coast. So I seriously considered selling some Bitcoin to buy a boat home to try to escape Australia. I looked at every possible situation, but I was essentially trapped on Prison Island for 2 years. And I was on one of the first flights out of Australia to get out of there in early 2022 when the international borders for Australia opened up. But I had to have a written letter from an employer to actually get me out of that country, because at the time, with my medical status, I still wasn't allowed out of the country. So the international borders opened up for people who had chosen to do something with their medical status, but not for me. I needed a written letter from my boss getting me out of the country. So yeah, long story short, it was 2022 is when I finally escaped.
Right on. So you finally escaped. Where's the first place you went? Did you throw some darts at a globe? Did you have a plan of I was going to go here or there? Where'd you go first?
So I wanted to be on a good time zone with my employer at the time, Mark Moss. So my first flight internationally ever was from Australia to Mexico. So it was a 19-hour flight that, believe it or not, had to transit through Canada. At the time, I wasn't allowed to transit through any of the flights through America because of, once again, my medical status. But funny enough, with my medical status, I could go to Canada to transit to Mexico. So strange story, but it ended up being a 19-hour flight from Australia to Mexico, which was obviously very scary in and of itself, because to somebody who'd never traveled before overseas, I was brainwashed with the propaganda. Oh, Mexico is one of the most dangerous countries in the world, Luke. You can't live there as an Australian. You're a gringo. You're going to, get into all sorts of different trouble in Mexico. But and all of my friends who had traveled internationally all said the same thing. So yeah, long story short, one-way ticket from Australia to Mexico. I packed up literally everything. I closed my small business that I was running at the time. I'd plowed thousands of dollars into turning the garage at my little rental home into a gym, which was that was my small business at the time. I was a personal trainer. I had to say goodbye to everything. My dog, I had a dog for 5 years. She's now in a better home. So yeah, it's a pretty big decision to move to the other side of the world.
Mexico. So like you were in Mexico, you were in Central America, you were in South America. All these travels, like, and of course you're working with Mark Moss. You were working as a copywriter in the background. What were you doing with him?
Yeah, so he trained me to do absolutely everything. So
Hmm.
copywriting, email writing, Twitter writing, how to grow YouTube, all of the good stuff.
Right on. And so like, yeah, you stayed in mostly Central South America. What was your favorite place, at least in your early parts of your journey?
Great question again. Every country is different for a different reason. So I think the first time I went to Peru, that was one of the first South American countries I ever went to, and I went and saw Machu Picchu, and I was just shocked at how cheap it was. But then, like, the more you travel, the more shocked you get. And then I found Colombia, and I was even shocked at how much cheaper it is there. And recently, just spent many months in Argentina, and it was so cheap. I'm going to go and try to get a passport in Argentina. So I'm going to get a residency process down there. So each country is different for different reasons. Being a gringo in El Salvador in mid 2022, when there wasn't many gringos in the country, was an experience as well. Then and even now in 2024, like, the El Salvadorian people are some of the most happy and friendly people I've ever met before in the world. Even if you don't speak a lick of Spanish, they're still going to help you out with absolutely everything you need. So each country definitely does have its benefits and its drawdowns as well. It's a very interesting place to live.
Right on. So you worked with Mark Moss. He taught you the ropes. Very, very knowledgeable social media presence, social media personality. And then you met John from CoinBeast in 2021. Where did you meet him? What was that engagement like? And talk about your CoinBeast journey with me.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to stumble upon meeting John online, I believe in 2021. So I was doing a little bit of part-time work for CoinBeast, doing the Twitter. I think we were helping out with newsletters in 2021. And then I think 2022 rolled around. I got the chance to meet both the founders, John and Justin, at Bitcoin Miami 2022. And, it was a great opportunity to meet those lads. We hung out for a whole day. Yeah, it was a great opportunity to meet those guys. And then a little bit later down the road, I think it was the beginning of 2023, I got the opportunity to head front the YouTube channel that we're on right now. So yeah, that was an absolute dream job for me, and the first time I'd ever really started making YouTube videos in a more serious light. So yeah, it was an absolute dream job making videos last year on the Money Matters YouTube channel. And yeah, I mean, it was brilliant working with the Coinbase guys.
Right on. Well, you've definitely left your impact. I mean, you have hundreds of videos online under your own brand and theirs. And you were living in this general hemisphere at the time for this whole time, right? Did you ever live in Europe for any extended period of time, or was it always like a visit and coming right back?
So I think I did around 10 or 11 or 12 states in the US, but only on like the America continent. Right now is the first time I've actually been outside of that America continent since 2022. I'm a big believer that that continent has everything you need, and it's a very good place to weather any potential storms that may or may not come over the next few years.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm only going to be in Europe for a little while now for the conference going down in Madeira, and I'll be back to South America, enjoying the cheap food and the amazing culture and beautiful views that there is down in there in South America.
Great. And you're already in Portugal. Is that where Bitcoin Atlantis is?
Yeah,
Right
yeah.
on.
So we're,
Go
I
ahead.
think, I believe it's about a week away from today.
Okay, right. So you're already there, enjoying the sights. Is it beautiful? How's it compare to South America, the other Portuguese countries?
Oh, it's a great question as well, because yeah, it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to in the world. So Hawaii was a very magical place. So is the coastline of California. One of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. Coastline is absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, I think Madeira, Portugal is certainly up there with places like Machu Picchu in Peru and Christ the Redeemer in Brazil. So that was another really cool place the girlfriend and I went and visited in 2023. Brazil being one of those Portuguese countries. The language has still escaped me though. I've learned a little bit of Spanish, but absolutely not a lick of Portuguese. It's I think it's even more difficult than Spanish to speak.
I tell you, I don't know how you do it. You know, as an English speaker, I learned some Spanish in high school, but the idea of, me and my wife, we visited Italy last spring. And it's like, oh, I can read a few words here or there. They kind of understand Spanish. The idea of navigating, you know, your whole life every day, and people not being able to share basic or even moderate communication with you. Maybe some basic, but the moderate communication, the more advanced communication, it kind of freaks me out. You're courageous, you're a hero, but I'm looking at these Bitcoin Atlantis speakers and I don't see you there. And so I'm gonna poke on that one a little bit, because I can be a little Bitcoin troll once in a while when I get excited. Why the hell are you not on this list of 60 speakers? Did they slip up? Did they miss something?
I don't think I applied to be a speaker. I'm just going there for the fun, meeting a couple of new co-workers for a new job I'm currently doing right now. So yeah, I'm just over here for travels. I'm going to meet and greet a few people. I don't really like speaking unless someone, you know, really wants me to speak. I'll do it. I think I'm speaking at there's a conference on the day before the Madeira conference that's been put on by My First Bitcoin. So I'm going to give a little bit of a speak there, which will be fun. But no, and I won't be speaking at Madeira. It's far too intimidating for me. I think there's going to be thousands of people there. So I think the most people I've ever spoken in front of was maybe 200 or 300 people in like a live audience. And that was fun. But I think there's 5,000 people going to Madeira. So so it's it'll be a great conference. I'm really excited to get there.
Good. That's funny. You have to apply. I just felt like they had scouts, and it's like, we need that person and that person. So I don't know. I saw the list. And I'm like, where the hell is Luke? He should be here. He is the epitome of the digital nomad. So they're missing out. But I understand. You know, you kind of want to keep that low key dynamic, which is why you're hanging out in South America. Let me pause for a moment because I want to address the audience. You guys, this is our first episode. I hope you're enjoying my conversation with Luke. And remember, we want to grow this. We want to grow this channel, and we're going to grow this channel with your help. So if you could click the subscribe button if you have not already. Your engagement is vital to executing the Money Matters mission to help the world understand the criticality of sound money in all facets of life. So Luke, like going back to the conversation with living in America. So you've been in the continental United States. You know, for me, it's all I know. I know Southern California. I grew up here, never left. Visit, of course, many places, never put my roots down. Tell me the good and bad about the United States.
Well, that's a question. I'm going to try to not get myself in trouble here. I've got lots of friends in the United States.
You're fine. Come on now.
Funny enough,
let it out on this show. Go ahead.
I'm never filtered online. And funny enough, I actually had a base in Southern Cali there for a few months. It's one of my most favorite places in the world.
What city? What city, if you don't mind?
San Clemente.
Okay, a little too south for me. That's the San Diego part. I'm more in the LA County. But go ahead. Talk to me.
Yeah, so I mean, America's very different. That's the first thing I'll say. So I don't keep track of how many places I've been to, but I've been to 10 or 11 different cities. So I did all the major ones, Miami, LA, Washington, Dallas. I can't remember all the other ones.
Chicago at all?
No, I didn't do Chicago.
Good job. No, I'm just playing. I'm just all the Chicago people. Jan Prichter is going to say, like, you're no longer my friend. I'm just playing. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm going to have to go now. I did Portland. I did a few. And what I'll say is going to different states in America is fascinating because it's almost like going to a different country. Like the cultural differences, the accents and the differences in language just between different cities in America is truly unique. And you don't see that in a place like Australia. So Australia by landmass, I don't know if it's bigger than America or not. I know it's very big. But if you go from one side of Australia to another, most Australians are the same. They sound like me. They sound like a bogan. We all talk in a very similar sense. But in America, people are completely different. But so that's from a cultural standpoint. Things are very different in America. That's a good thing. I'm trying to go through the good things before the bad things. I don't want to trigger too many of my American friends. I love the freedom aspect. So like obviously in the red states, people love freedom. They understand the Constitution, and that is a foreign concept in Latin America. Latin American people just do not understand the importance of a constitution and freedom. It's simple, and like property rights, human rights.
I want to interject real quick. Would you say that Latin Americans are generally more collective in culture, and whereas the red state Americans are probably a little more individually driven?
100%, yeah. Individualism reigns supreme in the red states, and Latin America, from my limited understanding, feels a lot more collectivized. Collectivism reigns supreme, so to say. Yeah. So
because it doesn't necessarily, just because you're collectivist doesn't necessarily mean you're a communist or a socialist. Like you can have more sacrificial qualities for the sake of the greater good without demanding that you're knocking down doors and give up or die per se. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to tug on that one a little bit. You have been on the ground in far off places, mostly Latin America. I want to know, how do you intersect Bitcoin, which is the most individually driven self-sovereign money we have, with the generally collectivist culture of Latin America? Obviously there is a tie. El Salvador, Argentina is making moves in a more individually driven way. There's a lot of freedom in those places, but again, the culture, the basis of the culture. Maybe you can expand on your experience there, where the intersections are and where there's a disconnect.
Yeah, so eventually there becomes a point in time where somebody's paying gets so high that ideology is thrown out the window. And I think you could see that in Latin America. Countries like Venezuela, Argentina, these countries who have had the highest amount of inflation and the highest amount of pain, they have the highest rates of Bitcoin adoption. So I think there does come a point in time where ideology doesn't matter and it all comes down to economic necessity. And eventually, every single person on planet Earth is going to realize that Bitcoin is an economic necessity, so to say. So I don't think cultural differences have had a huge impact on Bitcoin adoption in Latin America. I think it's more economically driven.
Right on. And so, speaking of economically driven, so now you're a digital nomad. I hate the word crypto nomad. So you're a digital nomad. You're living off of your Bitcoin. And you've mentioned that many times, and it's like, hey, this is how I'm going to live. There are obvious challenges, the medium of exchange dynamic, the access dynamic. Talk to me about living off of Bitcoin. Talk to me about where someone like me who's like, I'm not leaving, the first world, but you obviously were successful to a degree. Where are the pros? Where are the cons? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I think overall it's easier to live on Bitcoin than fiat. But there are obviously challenges. Like right now, I have a challenge trying to, convert Bitcoin into fiat. That's typically the hardest challenge. Living in El Salvador is so easy because you can just pay for everything in Bitcoin. And when you get paid in Bitcoin, it's instant. Like the challenges come with fiat. That's where the friction comes when I'm trying to convert Bitcoin into fiat. But I think I follow some basic rules. Like I try not to go to a new country unless I have a couple $100 of the local currency on me. And if you have that, you're fine. So I'll typically do that at an airport. I don't mind about getting scammed really hard on the exchange rates at an airport for $100. It just happens. One of the prices you have to pay of being a nomad. And there are things like that are barriers, so to say, and annoyances when you are traveling to different countries. I think the way I explain it to people, because a lot of people look at these and they say, I wouldn't want to be a nomad. You have to pay 15% currency conversion fees and all of these other annoyances being a nomad. But I think at the end of the day, when you're saving 50% of your income in taxes because your nation state isn't extracting wealth from you, I think it certainly does make up for it. So I'm just trying to think of more specific examples. Obviously, the currency exchange is a big one. Banking is difficult as well because I only have Australian bank accounts, but I don't have any debit cards anymore. I've been gone for so long, I don't have any cards. So that's obviously a difficulty. I can't use any ATMs, but yeah, I think the places that have the most Bitcoin adoption, they're the easiest countries to live.
Right on. So ease. So I want to talk about two challenges from an ease dynamic. Your challenges and the people in the region. And I kind of want to start with your challenges before we branch off. So you released a video recently on your own on your own platform that talked about. I lost it, but it talked about the. Let me see. Let me quote it. So I failed as a digital nomad, and we'll put it in the links in the show notes when this show is published. But if you can summarize, it's one of your longer videos, 21 minutes. Summarize, like, what is that about? Like, is this a teaser? Did you really feel like you failed? Or if you can give a synopsis without, giving everything. We want people to go watch the video, of course. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so it's essentially talking about the challenges of running online businesses. So I am trying to scale my online businesses aggressively. And when you're doing that, you obviously run into different challenges. So I think at one stage, at the height of what I was doing, I think I had like 7 or 8 different clients and a team of 15 employees working under me. And when I say I failed, I'm actually referring to the fact that I had to let go many of the contractors that I had. And as I lost a couple of my clients in quick succession. So sometimes things happen in groups. So that happened to me. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to make a video kind of explaining the challenges of living as a digital nomad and having these online income streams. So I help other YouTubers scale and grow their YouTube channel. But the way I structure my product is I typically only really want someone paying me for as long as they need me. So I typically structure the educational programs I have for YouTube in like a 4-week kind of program. So typically they like roll over or expire after 4 to 6 weeks.
More gig economy kind of thing.
Yeah, so I try to teach a YouTube client everything I know in like 4 weeks. So then they can go and do that themselves. I obviously also I have other services, like I have a team of editors who edit videos, make thumbnails. And obviously I do all the ideation behind the titles and the video ideas. But so it's a little bit like a social media agency. But so I kind of try to teach everyone everything they need to know within 4 weeks. So yeah, when I say I failed as a digital nomad, a couple of those contracts rolled over. And yeah, I took that as an opportunity to try to teach someone the challenges of growing online income streams and doing that as a nomad. Because if you have a very volatile income, can be a little bit difficult trying to plan your trips around the world. Because right now we're in an expensive part of the world over here in Europe. And I'm not sure if I would have booked this trip if I knew that my income would have taken a dip when it did. So obviously there's a few nuances there and a few little, specific things you need to be aware of. But yeah, in that video, I just essentially talked about my whole year of 2023, how I scaled my online business from 1 revenue stream to 8, and I lost a couple, and my plans for the future.
Right on. And so you look like you're mitigating that. You're gonna survive. We don't have to say, oh my gosh, we have to go out there and save Luke. This is great. That's good news. I was like, what the heck? But there are some other people who need saving, and it's essentially all the people around the world, primarily the the people who are no coiners, haven't discovered Bitcoin. Can you discuss the challenges of the people in the regions that you visited, primarily, I guess, the third world, or the what's the other word for that?
Developing.
I forget the term. Developing nations. Yeah, and you've been all throughout South America, Central America. What do those challenges look like for those people, and how are those challenges mitigated?
Yeah, so I like to use the term ascending and descending instead of developing and developed, because this again kind of ties into my overall framework of the world. I think these developed countries, America, Australia, Europe, the UK, Canada, I think they're actually all descending countries. So we're watching them decline. We're watching civil liberties decline in those countries. We're watching taxes rise, the opportunity to start a business decline. I've got a buddy in Australia right now, on the phone to him yesterday. Shout out to my boy Stoic. And he's talking about how hard it is to start a business in Australia. It's impossible. So I think of those countries as descending countries, and countries that are typically known as, developing, I see them as, ascending countries. They're going to improve. They're going to continue to want to actually attract digital nomads to their country to bring in all of this economic activity. But I think the challenges that many of these underdeveloped countries face is the fact that they've been stolen from for so long. So if you look at all of these countries in Africa or Latin America, they've had the highest amounts of inflation and a lot higher rates of inflation than the Western world. And that is because their governments, they essentially just go harder on the money printer. they extract more wealth from their society. And I was doing a video on this earlier today. I think there's like 70% of the developing or the emerging market countries have inflation above 5%, 70%. So that's pretty much all of them. That's a lot of countries. If you compare that to advanced economies, I believe that number is something like 30%. So big difference. And I think that's the biggest challenge that anybody faces. Like if inflation is compounding at like 10% per year, you're going to lose half of your purchasing power. And I forget the exact statistics, but it's something like 15 years. You're going to lose half your purchasing power. So I believe that's obviously one of the biggest challenges that these emerging market countries are facing.
Right on. So, have you ever been to Africa?
Not once.
Not once. So, what's kept the digital nomad out of Africa?
I like to think of things in years. So first, I want to conquer Latin America. I want a mission with the girlfriend to see every single country in Latin America. She's obviously Salvadorian, so her passport's not the best. So we want to, the plan right now is to actually get herself and myself a passport in Argentina for the next 2 years. And once we do that, we're probably going to venture out over to Africa. How about you? Have you been to Africa or know anyone who's been?
No, I've never been to Africa. I don't think I'm going. I don't think I'm going to Africa. I'm like the opposite of a digital nomad. I mean, I can't even think about moving to Las Vegas. I'm like, why would I move to Las Vegas? I have the ocean here. It's like, the funny thing about being in LA is that it's very similar to there's a place that you mentioned. Oh yeah, you mentioned like a lot of the cities that you thought were so beautiful. The coastline of Southern California, Portugal, I think Chile, I think you may have mentioned, but the catch is that like that ocean access is kind of a therapeutic to me. And then when you think about, like, I can just look over my shoulder and I see the big city, but I live in the suburbs, and it's like, okay, I can go to any of these regions, and then I drive 4 hours and I can go to the mountains. It just feels like I have everything I need right here. If I for instance, move to Australia, then it's like, it's the outback. That's how I see it. It's just the outback with Sydney and Brisbane. so it's I think that's the prejudice I have against like running away from LA. I'm pretty sure some New Yorkers have that dynamic, but it's like, someone needs to pull me out of my little comfort zone. Maybe one day, who knows what the next cycle will look like. And speaking of, go ahead.
I was just going to quickly say, I think that's a great point. I think a lot of people are drawn to the ocean, and that's one of the biggest things I miss as a nomad sometimes, living next to the ocean. So I certainly think like LA is a beautiful place. So I don't blame you for not wanting to leave. It's a beautiful place. One of my favorite.
There are pluses and minuses. I mean, we're in California. Some people call it California. I do as well. So it's like the politics are rough. It's nice but I give the counter argument. It's nice to find pockets of individuality, pockets of freedom, pockets of a little bit more palatable jurisdictional violence, if you will, because they're all violating us. So it's like living in certain suburbs, you get like, oh wow, I would never think that this is Los Angeles, even as close to the places where I live, which is a stone's throw from places like LAX, Santa Monica. You'll be surprised of how palatable the living style is for people who are more family oriented, more individually sovereign, kind of like, yeah, you know, I don't need that government program looking over my shoulder all the time. So it just depends on where you live. It's almost like every street, I would say every street is different in cities, which, you know, you turn down the wrong street, you're in trouble. In the same way, every jurisdiction, every town has a different dynamic that it's impacted by the money printer and the state. So speaking of, and again, we're going through this time frame where how we see our world right now, how you saw Australia when you decided to leave, how I see Los Angeles now in 24 or throughout this whole cycle, this past cycle. This next cycle is going to change things, and the cycle after that is going to change things as well. So from like a futurist Bitcoin perspective, and maybe even a little bit of maybe pull it back to the present as well. In your eyes, what does global adoption look like? How's it going to materialize? Talk to me.
Like, I'm hopeful that global adoption is slow. I hope that Bitcoin price appreciation is slow, and that's obviously going to give a chance for global adoption to do its thing. However, my base case on what I think is going to happen is that we're probably going to see Bitcoin worth millions of dollars. I actually think tens of millions of dollars by 2030. And I sadly think that global adoption is still probably going to be less than 5%. I think less than 5% of people will be actually taking self-custody of their Bitcoin, despite it being at an astronomically high price. So this is, again, probably one of the biggest misconceptions I see in the Bitcoin space. They think that price is an indicator of adoption, but I don't think that's true. Bitcoin is a monetary technology, and I think the people who control the most amount of money are going to increase the price and affect the price disproportionately when they actually adopt Bitcoin. So Michael Saylor is a great example of it. He's just one individual. So if you're measuring Bitcoin adoption through a user-based system, Michael Saylor is 1 divided by 8 billion people. But the amount of monetary energy that he brings to the Bitcoin network, when he adopts Bitcoin, he's already bought 1% of the Bitcoin supply, essentially. So I just believe we're in a period of time where nation states, other public company CEOs like Michael Saylor, and sovereign wealth funds all around the world are scrambling to buy Bitcoin. And I believe that these people are going to push the price of Bitcoin to an astronomical figure before 2030. We can already see that the amount of Bitcoin sitting on exchanges today, it's been shrinking for 4 years. Where are they going? Where are the coins going? I've been making the case for 3 years, since 2021, that they're going into the hands of people like Michael Saylor, who are covertly accumulating Bitcoin. So I just believe, sadly, that's how I see Bitcoin adoption going. I'm hopeful that the price stays low for a long amount of time, giving all of these people who need it most the chance to accumulate Bitcoin. But I think they've had 15 years to accumulate it, and the window to accumulate Bitcoin and get it off an exchange is shrinking by the day.
There's a couple things to note there when it comes down to, you could call it price suppression, you can call it price, you can call it these institutional adoption. The institutional adoption isn't necessarily driving the price up perfectly, as we see this. And I don't like talking about the ETFs. I'm not an ETF guy, but when you see, because it's all kind of public, you see how GBTC is selling off while BlackRock, Fidelity, etc., they are increasing their count. So it's like we get excited about the ETFs, but it's almost like the institutions are handing off the reins of cheap Bitcoin to this next generation of institutions, which are the legacy institutions. And it just seems like at some point after that transaction is done, after GBTC is bled dry, after maybe some other institutions are bled dry, then it's like, okay, or early institutions are bled dry, then all of a sudden you can say, okay, guys, like let's let's go ahead and close the doors, and let's drive this sucker up so no regulars, no plebs can get any access to Bitcoin at a, you can say, reasonable price. Of course, it's all relative, but I kind of agree with you in that standpoint. But I will say that in the future, when all this Bitcoin is off the exchanges, you have this multi-million-dollar Bitcoin price in terms of dollar exchange rate. Do you see adoption in terms of people getting paid in Bitcoin more ubiquitously, more whether it's in the developing world or the ascending world or the descending world? Do you see that people will be paid in Bitcoin in the future?
100%. It's already happening here in El Salvador to a certain degree. Like my girlfriend's parents are even seriously considering getting a portion of their paycheck paid in Bitcoin. So like everyday people in El Salvador are considering it. So I think in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, where, around the year 2030, the turn of the decade, I think a lot more people will be demanding to be paid in Bitcoin. Even in Argentina, Pam and myself are able to go get massages and pay in Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. So like we can go buy groceries with Bitcoin on the Lightning Network in Argentina. So it's not just this isolated example of people demanding to be paid in Bitcoin in El Salvador. It's happening in other countries like Argentina as well. And this was before Javier Milei was elected as president. And he essentially, he got rid of all the legal tender laws essentially and deregulated Bitcoin as a currency to be used. This was last year in October when we were there, like before the election. So yeah, I think a lot more people are going to be demanding to be paid in Bitcoin. I'm already one of them. I demand to get paid in Bitcoin. The one client I have that pays me in fiat, I always have a massive pain in the ass whenever I get paid trying to convert it into Bitcoin. It's just not tenable for everyday life. It's just a pain. So so I think we're going to certainly see adoption increase and people will demand to get paid in Bitcoin more.
And that's the beautiful thing about it, because if you're demanding to be paid in hard money, especially as you get closer to government centers of economy, if, for instance, government employees start saying, I want to be paid in Bitcoin, if the military industrial complex starts saying, I want to be paid in Bitcoin, what ends up happening is, they run out of Bitcoin. They just can't print more to pay for that. And so what ends up happening to pay their bills? So what ends up happening is like, oh, well, we can't pay you as much. What ends up happening is maybe, guess what? The military industrial complex shrinks. Maybe government bureaucracy shrinks because people can only pay so much in a money that you just can't create more of arbitrarily. So do you think that as people demand being paid in Bitcoin, that government and near government institutions start losing their power?
Yeah, certainly inevitable. And if Bitcoin doesn't do that, I think Bitcoin's failed. I don't think Bitcoin was ever intended to be used by everybody peer to peer, despite that being one of the first lines on the white paper that Satoshi wrote in 2008. I think the mission for Bitcoin is to shrink the size of governments and abolish central banks. And I think if Bitcoin does that, I think if even Bitcoin does half of that, it doesn't necessarily need to abolish all the central banks around the world in the next 10 years for it to succeed. But I think if it shrinks the size of government, I think Bitcoin is succeeding. I think that's how we measure its success.
Right on. So before we get too far, you were mentioning your life in Argentina, going to the massage parlor, paying on the Lightning Network. That sounds great. And Argentina, Javier Malay, I've seen some of your videos of Javier. You seem to have a plus minus love, not love kind of dynamic, very, very thought out. What's his role in this drive towards a more free world economy, a less fiat economy? Do you trust him? Do you distrust him? Doesn't matter if you trust him or not. Talk to me about Argentina and Malay.
Yeah, great question. Lots of different opinions on Javier Malay, that's for
I'm
sure.
going to let you, I'm going to feature you. You can just rip. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I can see a lot of the things that we need to be cautious of with Javier Milei. So I did a video of him in mid 2023 saying, why is he listed on the website of the World Economic Forum? Typically, people listed on that website don't have good interests in mind for the everyday person. So I did a video questioning this way back in 2023 when most people were celebrating him. Then I got shown that there was actually one time that Javier Milei gave a speech at the World Economic Forum in 2014. So I thought, okay, it's interesting. I better actually go do the research. So I watched the whole hour 20 long presentation that he was a part of on that World Economic Forum speech way back in 2014. He spoke twice, and he essentially gave the World Economic Forum the big middle finger. He took a certain question a certain way and used it as an opportunity to attack Marxism and socialism in his country. And he attacked the economics minister in Argentina at the time, saying he's a Marxist, he's a socialist. We're in an economic crisis because of these people. This was back in 2014, so Argentina's been in perpetual crisis. So like I can see and recognize some of the red flags that people have. Like I've seen him waving like a Ukraine and an Israel flag. So I've seen some people say, okay, he's supporting war, or he's, XYZ. I can see all of those things, but I think I'm more interested. I think the signal that we should take from Javier Milei is what he's doing in the country. So he's already fired tens of thousands of government employees, all of these, woke ministries. He's abolished a lot of them already in the 2 months that he's been in office. He said it's absolutely non-negotiable that he abolishes the Central Bank of Argentina. So I think that's the signal we should probably take from Javier Milei right now. And I think he has the potential to be one of the most important leaders of this millennia, behind Bukele. I think Bukele right now is probably the most influential and most important leader that we've seen in the 2000s, so in the past 24 years. And I think Javier Milei has the potential to be number two, but it's still very early on in Javier Milei's reign. But I think so far, I think he's been a net positive, and I don't know if I'd say I trust him. I don't trust any politician, any leader. But I think Bukele is the most promising leader we have in the world. And I think Javier is number two.
Right on. And there's, of course, that's the motto. That's the basis. Don't trust, verify. But I will say that a signal of who you can palate, who you can stomach a little more than the others is when a politician starts rising and the media does everything they can to make you hate them in every which way that sometimes is irrational. I've heard Marxist, I've heard Nazi about Javier Malay, and he is Jewish. So it's kind of like these dynamics of these strategies of the media. They're irrational for the most part, but the people are subjugated to the media propaganda machine. And so if they hear the big blowhorn say bad, the media knows that they're going to pull some people to their side for no reason at all, for no basis at all. So it's like when I hear the House of Representatives and the representative in Minnesota talking about how Bukele, we need to sanction Bukele because he's interfering with democracy. And it's like, why does Minnesota care what's going on in El Salvador? El Salvador is smaller. It's probably as small as St. Paul, if not the same size. And then we talk about Malay. It's like, you guys had your socialist government for years, and now you want to yell and scream and protest for one guy who, guess what? If you don't like him, vote him out. But for some reason, the control is so very important to maintain this current system that if a small break a small chink in the armor, like El Salvador, potentially Malay, laying off thousands of unnecessary bureaucrats, then all of a sudden fiat gets exposed and people are like, oh. So I agree with you. Long-winded. Again, I wrote a piece for Malay on Simply Bitcoin's Substack, and I was really passionate about that. And so when you were coming out with things in that same time frame, I was bouncing my ideas off of your work. So I really applaud you on that. So you were in El Salvador, and you think Bukele is the most important leader we've had this millennia. Talk about some challenges in El Salvador, and where do you see them as Bitcoin appreciates, as Bitcoin ascends? How do you see that affecting El Salvador's place in the world?
I think it can only rise El Salvador's status as Bitcoin appreciates. I think what Bukele has done already has already been very transformative, because he's not only welcoming Bitcoin in the country, but he's doing all sorts of other things. He's following the Digital Nomad playbook. He's deregulating businesses from paying taxes. So it's not just Bitcoin businesses, like all tech businesses don't have to pay taxes in the country. I'm not an expert on that, so someone correct us in the comments if that's incorrect. But like Bukele, what he's done is phenomenal. And obviously, as Bitcoin appreciates, his Bitcoin, El Salvador's Bitcoin treasury is only going to appreciate. So I think, I think it's very, very, very critical. Obviously, what Bukele does next. So obviously he's been re-elected. I think he's been re-elected by the largest margin. He won that election by the largest margin in history, I believe, out of any democratic election in history, which is hilarious that we have Minnesota representatives saying Bukele's destroying democracy in El Salvador. We need a sanction, when in fact the truth is actually in reverse. So yeah, I think as Bitcoin appreciates, El Salvador benefits. I think it's also going to help adoption in El Salvador. To the few people who held on to that $30 of free Bitcoin that Bukele gave them, it's going to all of a sudden, well, it's in the green today. So these people are slowly learning that Bitcoin is not necessarily a get quick rich money, but it's actually a don't get poor slowly kind of money, where if you hold it for an extended amount of time, it appreciates, despite it being very volatile in the short term. So I think Bitcoin appreciation is it's good, very interesting, because I think the 2025 cycle is going to prove people like Bukele and Michael Saylor correct. As the amount of profit that they have on their Bitcoin portfolios continues to balloon, it's going to become absolutely undeniable that they were correct, and Bitcoin is the best treasury reserve asset for every company and every nation state around the world.
Yeah, and I think BlackRock coming behind them to run their ETF and Fidelity, where both of them have now surpassed, if you combine them, they surpass MicroStrategy's treasury. And I mean, when you think about 4 years ago, 3 years ago, BlackRock was the chief nemesis of Bitcoin, and now they have half as much as MicroStrategy. If that's not legitimacy from an institutional perspective, I don't know what is. So I want to ask you two more questions. The first one is, I want you to give me a hot take and or a Bitcoin story. And probably, you probably have given your hot takes, $10 million by 2030. But I want to get a Bitcoin story that nobody is talking about that you want to bring to the forefront. What's the biggest, most important story that nobody, or it's kind of like underwhelming vibe? Why don't you bring that to the forefront? What do you think?
Oh, it's a great one. I think I've got another hot take in the.
Give me a hot take too. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't. Let me think about that underappreciated story in a second. Actually, I've got it. I know the story that nobody's talking about. Nation states mining Bitcoin. Absolutely nobody is talking about the fact that nation states all around the world are mining Bitcoin. Like obviously we have Saudi Arabia investing billions into Bitcoin mining. We have Oman, a Middle Eastern country, coming out investing $1.1 billion into Bitcoin mining in 2023. El Salvador, they're investing $1 billion into Bitcoin mining. And then that's kind of the Middle East and Latin America Bitcoin mining forays that we're seeing. Then if you have a look in Southeast Asia, I think you're seeing some really interesting things go on with Bitcoin mining. China's still the second or the third largest Bitcoin miner in the world. And then you have other smaller countries around China. So you have Laos. Laos has been mining Bitcoin since 2022. Very small, very, very small country in Southeast Asia. But an even smaller one got exposed in 2023. I've made multiple videos on the Kingdom of Bhutan. And they have obviously been mining Bitcoin since 2019. And we only learned about them and their Bitcoin operation because they got exposed in the bankruptcy filings when Celsius and BlockFi both went bankrupt. We got to see all of the customers on their balance sheet. And surprise, surprise, somebody spotted the sovereign wealth fund from the Kingdom of Bhutan on that bankruptcy filings. And when that got exposed, I think the sovereign wealth fund's name was Druck or something interesting like that. The Kingdom of Bhutan came out and they said, yes, we've been using BlockFi and Celsius to get US dollar stablecoin loans and get loans and buy Bitcoin, etc. But not only that, we've also actually been mining Bitcoin since 2019. We've been buying it since it was under $5,000 a coin, and we're going to do more. We're going to invest another $500 million into Bitcoin mining. So I think there are other nation states around the world doing exactly what the Kingdom of Bhutan did. I think if you look at the shipment of ASICs, again, don't take this one, take this one with a grain of salt. But I remember seeing Russia has had massive shipments of ASICs since like 2021. So again, that's very interesting because that was the year they said we're going to officially try to de-dollarize our entire economy. Very interesting. I was tweeting about that in 2021. I got called a crazy person by all sorts of people. I was a conspiracy theorist, spreading disinformation in 2021 for saying that. But since Russia's come out and they said they're going to, we'll accept Bitcoin as well as other things for payment in oil. So I think Russia and the Kingdom of Bhutan are two pieces of signal that kind of suggest that there's other nations covertly mining Bitcoin. And I think that's kind of explained, I think that helps to explain why we have the parabolic Bitcoin hash rate that just continued to hit new all-time highs all throughout the Bitcoin bear market, which was the first time that's ever happened before in Bitcoin's life, that price has actually diverged away from the Bitcoin hash rate. So that's a little bit of a story that I don't think anyone's talking about at the moment.
That's brilliant. Yeah, it's funny, when you think about the Kingdom of Bhutan, Laos, El Salvador, and of course, Russia is already established, but the idea that these small nations, you almost want to call them, you almost want to call them city states, and because they're so tiny, and the fact that they could be the center of economic functionality, commerce in the future, and not so far distant future, it could be revolutionary. Where just like if you were to take an iPhone back 50, 60 years and say, look at this, you would be treated like an alien, like a god. And now you're going to go forward in the future 30, 40 years, and it's like, the Kingdom of Bhutan is like a major player in the world. People now would be like, what happened? Well, they had an eye on something in 2019, and it just happened to be right. So is that the hot take as well, or did you have another one?
That's I've got a hot take, but I think I want to double down on what you said about the Kingdom of Bhutan. I think you're on the money.
Yes, sir.
That country, I forget the exact statistics that I did when I was researching the video, but their GDP is smaller than El Salvador's. So they have less than 1 million people living in the Kingdom of Bhutan. So El Salvador has a 6 million population, I think, from memory, somewhere around there. And they have less than 1 million people living there. Their GDP is $1 or $2 or $3 billion per year. So for them to invest $500 million into Bitcoin mining, think about what percentage of their GDP is being invested into Bitcoin. I also did a video on that recently, kind of showing that, okay, if El Salvador and the Kingdom of Bhutan are investing 10, 20, 30% of the country's GDP into Bitcoin mining, that's massive. And compare that to what that would look like if America made a similar percentage investment for their GDP. How much money would they have to invest into Bitcoin mining to stay proportionally ahead of these smaller nations who are far more nimble and can take these bigger risks? And it's just absurd. Imagine America investing 5, 5 to 10 trillion dollars into Bitcoin mining. It's not possible. You can't buy that many chips. So like Bitcoin mining is going to allow these smaller nations to leapfrog just because they are so small. But again, that's like a whole nother 20-minute video rabbit hole you can send me down. The final hot take I've got for today has to do with Bitcoin volatility. So again, I've been screaming this since 2021. I think Bitcoin's volatility is going to rise until it's maybe $5 to $10 million a coin. I think until it gets to that price point, I think that's when volatility slowly starts to enter a downtrend. So a lot of people right now think, oh, the Bitcoin ETFs are here, the institutions are here, Bitcoin's volatility is going to begin decreasing from now. And they're looking at the amount of returns we see in each Bitcoin bull market getting smaller and smaller. And there's far too much confidence in that trend. You're hearing, the diminishing returns theory of Bitcoin. I've been screaming since 2021 that that's all baloney. It's all BS. How can you see lower volatility in Bitcoin when 99.9% of the world hasn't adopted Bitcoin correctly? So I think Bitcoin's at 0.1% adoption today. To assume that the volatility has already peaked and, Bitcoin's volatility is going to get smaller from today, I think that's a hopeful take. So I'm going to go easy on my diminishing returns theory, friends. I just think volatility is going to rise, and it's going to rise for a lot longer than most people think.
Luke, it's been brilliant. This is a great conversation. It's a great first episode. There are a few technical difficulties with me trying to find my way with the script and everything, but the dynamic that you bring to the table, the story that you bring as a legitimate digital nomad, literally living the Bitcoin life. I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you. I'm happy that I finally am able to meet you. And I hope to bring you on stage again, and we can talk about some of those other rabbit holes in the near future. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for your time. I'm really excited to see where you take this thing this year, and I'd be absolutely honored to come back on at any time. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So Luke was great, and I want to thank everyone who tuned into this episode, making it a reality. Look out for future shows where we bring other brilliant voices that help discover why money matters to everything. I am Sir Ulric, like my father before me. See you next time.